Right, we're doing the homework assignment for 1-2.1, and we're going to, I'm sorry, that's not the one we're doing. We're doing the homework assignment for 1.2, I'm sorry. The first thing that you're going to do is adding and subtracting real numbers. In your notes, you want to keep track of this. So what I would suggest you do is set up your note paper like I showed you in the last lesson, where you have the section against the side. Just a second here. Okay. So you've got over along the side here, you're going to write down your notes, and here are the rules for adding and subtracting. If the signs are the same, you add them and give that sign. If the signs are different, take the smaller from the bigger and give it that sign, and give the sign of the bigger. And then finally, for subtracting, change the second sign and add. Okay, so let's look at this first one here. I don't know how that sign got in there, but just ignore that. So we're going to add -48 plus -7. So since the signs are the same, we add them. 48 plus 7 is 55, and we give it that sign. So the answer will be -55. Remember, on your calculator, you could just press -48 plus, I tell you what, I'm gonna get the picture of the calculator up there so that you can see it, and then I'll press the buttons on the calculator. That'll help you. No, that's not a very big picture of the calculator. Let's get a bigger one. Here we go. Come on. There. Okay. So let's try it again. Okay, so when you press the button on your calculator, you'd press this button first, -48, and then plus, and then -7. And your calculator will say -55. So that's what we'll put down for the answer. All right, next one. Now we've got a fraction problem. Okay, so the first thing we want to do Let's get the calculator up here. Sorry that button appears in the middle. First thing we want to do is to get a common denominator of these two denominators. So we'll write -1/11 plus 5/7. And the common denominator is 77, so this needs a 7 on the top and the bottom. And this needs an 11 on the top and the bottom. So this is -7/77, and this is 55/77. Notice I didn't put down the denominator, I'll just put it down here, 77. So now the signs are different when we're adding, and so we take the bigger one, minus the smaller one. 55 minus 7 is 48, and we give it the sign of the bigger one. So our answer is 48/77. On your calculator, you can press fraction key, so it'll be negative fraction key and put 1 on the top, and then use this button right here to go down to the bottom, 11th. And then you have to go over to get out of that, plus another fraction key, 5/7, and then press equals, and your calculator will say 48/77. Now the way you write that is you click on the fraction button over here on the left hand side, and then you would write 48 on the top and 77 on the bottom. All right. Number 3. Now we've got a subtraction problem. I'm going to get this out of the way. Okay, so we've got 4 minus -3. Remember that you change it to an addition problem by changing the second sign to positive. You can't have 2 plus signs, minus signs, or a plus and a minus sign in a row without having parentheses. So when we changed it, it becomes 4 plus 3, which is 7. On your calculator, you would press 4. Subtract key is over in the lower right-hand corner. Negative is 2 above the 7 key. Equals, and the answer is positive 7. Number 4. Another fraction problem. Oops. Okay, so we've got common denominator first, 1/10 minus -7/3. Our common denominator is 30, so we have to multiply the top one by 3/3 and the bottom one by 10/10. And the top numerator becomes 3. Bottom numerator becomes positive 70. Minus negative is the same as positive. Not going to put the denominators there, I'll just write them down here. So it'd be 73/30. On your calculator, you could just type fraction key 1/10, and then make sure you go over minus negative fraction key 7/3 equals, and your calculator says 73/30. So then we would enter fraction 73/30. Number 5. Now we've got an absolute value in this problem, so let's see how we would do that. So we have -8 minus. Now remember, the absolute value of -3 means how far is -3 from 0? Well, that's 3 from 0. So I just translated the absolute value of -3 as being 3. Notice that it's going to be subtract because there's a subtract sign in front of it. Signs are the same, so we add them, 11, and give it the sign of both of them. I'm pretty sure your calculator has an absolute value key. Let's see here. -8 minus shift. Yeah, it's this key right here. If you press shift that key, so it's -8 minus shift -3. So now it looks just exactly like it does in your calculator, and then you press equals and it'll say -11. So the answer is -11. All right, next one. A little bit longer problem, but not harder. So let's get it set up here. These two are added together, and then notice there's parentheses here, so we have to do that parentheses first. 4 subtract 3 is 1. So our problem is -7 plus -8 minus 1. So we change this -1 to plus -1. Now we've got 3 negatives, so we add them together. 7 and 8 and 1 makes 16, and give it that negative sign. On your calculator, you could just type -7. Make sure you use the negative key, not the subtract key, plus negative. You can have a plus and a negative sign in a row on your calculator. You don't need to use parentheses there. 8 minus. Now you do need to use parentheses here because it's 4 minus 3. It's not just one number in parentheses, it's 2. And so your calculator says -16. Number 7. Now we've got the rules for multiplying, so you might want to write these down. Oops. So let's go over to the side of our paper here and let's write down the rules for multiplying. When you multiply or divide, if the signs are the same signs, the answer is going to be positive. If the signs are different, the answer is going to be negative. So let's look at the problem that we've got here. Notice it says 9 times -8, signs are different. 9 times 8 is 72, and since the signs are different, it'll be negative. On your calculator, you don't need the parentheses. You can just type 9 times -8 equals, and it'll say -72. Remember, parentheses next to each other, open and close parentheses next to each other, means multiply. Number 8. Now probably the only way to do this problem is to use your calculator. So you would press on your calculator. Oops. Come on now. You would press in your calculator -2.9 times -2.65 equals. Now your calculator says 1537 over 200, but since it started being a decimal, you want to end it being a decimal, so click the S to D key and it'll say 7.685. Since the calculator didn't say to round it, we would write both of those parts, all the digits, 685. The other thing is a negative times a negative is a positive. Next one is a division problem. So we follow the rules for a division. 20 negative divided by 5, well, we'd take 20 divided by 5, which is 4. Since the signs are different, the answer will be -4. We would click in -4. Remember, the answer is only undefined if the denominator is 0. On your calculator, you could just press -20 divided by key 4 or 5 equals, and your calculator will say -4. As soon as you click into the box, it knows that that's the one that you want to check. 72 divided by -9, well, you've got 72 divided by 9 is 8, and since there's an odd number of signs, the signs are different, it will be -9. You could have pressed that on your calculator also. Number 11, 0 divided by 1. So in this problem, I've got no pizzas here, and I want to divide it by -1 person. Each person is going to get no pizza. On your calculator, you can press 0 divided by -1 equals, and your calculator will say 0. Now we've got a different problem, 9 divided by 0. So we check that. Now we've got 9 pizzas here and no people to eat them. How much does each person get? Well, we don't know because we don't know how many people there are. So if the denominator is 0, the answer is undefined. If you tried pressing your calculator, 9 divided by 0, your calculator will say math error, and so we will say the answer is undefined. Now we've got a different kind of a problem. It's 5 is, maybe you want to write some notes for this one also. When you have a number like 5 to the 4th, this is the base, this is the exponent. The exponent tells how many times the base is used as a factor. So this is the same as 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. On your calculator, you can just press 5 and then press the to the key, which is right up here next to the squared key, 4. So we'll press 5 to the key 4, and if you notice, it puts a 4 up in the top like that, and my calculator says 625 because 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 is 625. Number 14. Now it wants us to write this in exponential notation. In other words, you've got 7 is the base. Now we're going to write the to the there. 7 is to the, how many times is it used as a factor? 4. So when it says write exponential notation, it means to write it with an exponent like that. Okay? Now it says to simplify 7 to the 3rd. So we're back to pressing that key on our calculator. 7 to the key 3rd equals, and it would be 343. Number 16. Now we've got -5 to the 2nd. I want to show you something that students find very confusing, and so it's important that you do this the right way. They're saying -5 times a -5. A negative times a negative is a positive, and so it'll be 25 will be your answer. The way you do this one is you have to put parentheses, -5, close parentheses, and then you can press the squared key. Remember, the parentheses are just above the 9. If you don't, what you have is 5 squared, which is 25, with a negative sign in front of it. Or in other words, subtract 5 squared, which is subtract 25. If there is a negative sign and it's outside the parentheses, that's the way you do it. The reason this is so is, in our order of operations that we do things, we always do parentheses before we do exponents. And since this is an exponent, we don't do the exponent until after we've done the parentheses. If the negative sign would have been in front of the parentheses, we do the exponents before we do multiplication, division, and addition and subtraction. So the answer in this case is positive 25. Okay, this one is of the other variety, as I said before. notice now the negative sign is out front. So maybe it's time to take some notes and say, do parentheses, let's call it order of operations, and we're going to talk more about that later on. Parentheses is first, then exponents, then multiplication and division, and then division or addition and subtraction. If you remember, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, you will know the order of operations. So let's look at it in this case. We've got 3 to the 4th, and then we're going to subtract that. On our calculator, since our calculator knows that, we can just put negative 3 to the 4th equals, and our calculator will say negative 81. So we will just put in there negative 81. Number 19, now we're finding roots of numbers. Okay? So in this case, let's see here, I gotta get my... So the negative sign is after the square root. If we press on our calculator negative sign, then the square root key, which is kitty corner from it, square root key 576, our calculator will give us the correct answer, negative 24. Why negative 24? Because you subtract after you take the square root. So the answer is negative 24. Now we've got the square root sign underneath the radical. In other words, we're going to take the square root of negative 20 or negative 49. How do you do that? Well, on your calculator, what it's asking is what number, when you multiply it by itself, do you get negative 49? Well, the only way to get 49 is 7 times negative 7. One of those two numbers is negative. But as soon as one of them is negative, they have opposite signs. And so we can't do this one. The square root is not a real number. Now, if you try pressing that on your calculator, interestingly enough, square root negative 49, your calculator says math error. I thought maybe your calculator would do it. I'm going to go to see if your calculator will do it. Square root negative 49. Yeah, it does. If you go to mode and then press number 2, complex numbers, you'll see it say complex right up here on the top, CMPLX. And if you press square root negative 49, your calculator will say 7i, like this. And indeed, it is 7i is the correct answer. Now you might want to change your calculator back, so go mode 1, and then your calculator is back. So we would say the square root is not a real number. The I stands for imaginary, by the way. But we're going to be covering that in a few weeks. Well, actually longer than a few weeks. Another problem where we've got order of operations. We're going to simplify this using order of operations. Remember, as I said before, we've got parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. So in this case, we do the multiplication before we do the addition. You always go from left to right. So if there's a multiplication and division, you don't choose the multiplications before the divisions. You just do them in order from left to right. So 3 times 6 is 18. Add 3 is 21. your calculator, if you enter it just the way it is there, will give you the correct answer, 21. So in this case, the answer is 21. Now it says to evaluate. What does it mean to evaluate? Well, it means to give a value to a problem. And in this case, we're going to evaluate this if n is -6. So instead of writing n, we're going to write -6. And the square root of 64, because m is 64. So we've got the rules down there. Now what you might want to do is to write in your notes that when you see evaluate, it wants a number. Solve also wants a number. Okay? So in this case, when we evaluate that, 3 times -6 is -18. Square root of 64 is 8. -18 plus 8 is -10. On your calculator, you could just enter 3 times -6 plus square root 64 equals, and it'll say -10. Okay, now it's got some fractions, and so we might want to do some of these also. Oh, that's not quite tall enough. That's a 4, and that's a 1. Okay. Notice we've got a negative w, so it'll be -7 plus 5 times -4/15 plus 4 times 1/3 plus 2.28. Okay, well, 5 times -4 is -20/15. 4 times 1/3 is 4/3. So if we enter this on our calculator, -7 plus 5 times -4, oops, we have to get the fraction key in there. I forgot that. So I'm going to delete that and just go to fraction key. 4/15. What's interesting is I don't need to put the negative sign on top. I can have it in front. And then plus 4 times fraction key 1/3, -7 plus 5. Shows that teachers sometimes make mistakes too. 5 times -4/15 plus 4 times fraction 1/3 plus 2.28 equals, now my calculator says -118/25, which it wants it as a decimal, and I get -4.72. So I'm going to put in my answer, -4.72. All right, number 23. Now we're going to, it says use the properties of real numbers to simplify this expression. Now what do they mean by properties of real numbers? Well, in our book, they list the properties of real numbers. We should add these along the side of your notes. What I would suggest you do is watch the other video, because I clearly explain the properties of real numbers in the other video. In this case, the property that we're going to use is the distributive property. So let's see how the distributive property works. Okay, the negative 8 distributes inside here. So you have negative 8c, and then negative d is the same as positive 8d. So our answer will be negative 8c plus, 8d. Number 24, simplify this one. Well, we can simplify by combining these since they are like terms. We have negative 5 s's, add to it 3 s's, and we get negative 2 s's. This one looks like a good one for us to simplify. I don't believe we'll be able to use the calculator on it since it's got letters in the problem, but it does say to simplify. One of the steps, remember, to simplifying is to multiply out the parentheses. 2 times 2 is 4k. 2 times 3 is 6, minus 7k plus 6 plus 2. All right, our like terms are the 4k and the 7k, and the 6, and the 2. 4k minus 7k is negative 3k. 6 and 6 is 12, and 2 is 14. So our answer is negative 3k plus 14. Now I would suggest that you do it in that order. Always get the numbers at the end. Okay. Now it says, write an equivalent expression. So let's see how we get an equivalent expression. Using the associative property. Remember, the associative property means that you can move which ones you multiply together. So we could multiply the 3 times 2 first and then multiply by the x. So we're going to choose C as our answer. Then it says simplify that. 3 times 2 is 6x. Okay. Complete the statement so that the identity property is illustrated. Remember that in the identity property, oh, I'm sorry, I was doing the wrong property. Identity property is when you multiply by 1, what do you get? So in this box, we have to put times 1, and when we do, we get what answer? And our answer is going to be, negative 5 halves. All right, and that's the end of our assignment. Let's see here.